Hello and welcome to Access Asia. I'm Yuka Royer, and these are the stories we're covering this week. China steps out of the shadows, vowing to take a constructive role in Middle East peacemaking. How much is it really willing to get involved, and what does it have to lose or gain? We'll speak with an expert. The world's most populous nation has embarked on a long overdue and costly endeavour. The first phase of India's year-long census has got underway, with millions of officials carrying out door-to-door surveys. And one of Bollywood's most iconic voices has passed away. Asha Bhosle ruled the Indian music industry for over 7 decades with her versatility, creativity and energy. We must not allow the world to revert to the law of the jungle. Chinese President Xi Jinping made a thinly veiled jab at the United States as he broke his 6-week silence about the war in Iran. Putting forward a 4-point peace plan during talks with Abu Dhabi's Crown Prince, Xi signalled that Beijing would play a constructive role in brokering an end to the conflict. Meanwhile, US media reported that China was preparing to send weapons to Iran, and the Financial Times said Tehran had used a Chinese spy satellite to target American bases in the Gulf. Well, to get a sense of where and how Beijing is positioning itself in the Middle East conflict, let's bring in Dr. Ja Ian Chong, a political scientist at the National University of Singapore. Great to have you on our show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, despite repeatedly criticizing the military action against Iran, China had up until now stepped largely out of the fray. Why is President Xi Jinping speaking out right now?
So the speculation is that now that things seem to have come to a bit of a lull, the PRC may be in a position to sort of push forward in terms of trying to broker a more lasting peace. So the risks of failure may be a little bit lower, and the opportunities for success may be a bit higher.
In essence, though, the 4-point plan presented by Beijing offers little more than a call for respecting sovereignty and maintaining order. How is China balancing its friendship with Tehran with its broader strategic interests in the Middle East and beyond?
So you're absolutely right that the 4-point plan is long on principle and short on details. Now, these are general principles that basically anyone can theoretically get on board on. So in that sense, Beijing continues to play it very safe. It has lots of things on the table, both in the Middle East and more broadly. So in the Middle East, the PRC imports maybe about 20% of its oil and gas from the Middle East, about 12 or so percent from Iran. So clearly, it's important, especially for the short term. At the same time, Beijing has a pretty tough relationship with the U.S. It wants to, get its trade and tariff negotiations done, but it also doesn't want to escalate unnecessarily. So that's also looking forward to the upcoming visit by President Trump to the PRC. So Beijing is trying to, handle these different kinds of relationships. On top of that, it is a long-standing supporter of the regime in Tehran. We've talked about the supply of weapons. That's not new. It's something that has happened before. And Beijing is one of the few countries that continue to buy oil and gas from Iran despite the sanctions, right? That's why it's Iran's largest trading partner. So it's got all these balls in the air that it has to juggle and make sure none fall.
Yeah, I mean, this time, though, Donald Trump threatened any country providing weapons to Iran with higher tariffs. And this, of course, comes at a crucial time for Beijing as it's preparing to welcome President Trump on his visit, delayed visit to Beijing. So does China have reasons not to be seen as providing weapons as it had always done in the past?
Right. So I mean, this is the other part of the equation. I think for the PRC, it has a long-standing and sort of mutually understood relationship with Tehran. It probably doesn't want to see any sudden change to that relationship. So if that means providing some degree of support for the government in Tehran, perhaps including military weapons, that is certainly within the realm of possibility. Again, it's about trying to navigate, these various moving pieces that are sometimes at odds with each other.
Now, As you mentioned, I mean, China has long been a friend of Tehran, but it's not it doesn't have any military alliance, a treaty bound military alliance with Iran. Is it ready to perhaps change or update its status quo vis-a-vis Iran?
That's unlikely. I mean, the PRC is very wary of military alliances. It had a really bad experience with the Soviet Union. The only formal alliance it has today is with the DPRK. This is North Korea. So, it probably is wary about entrapment in the case of Iran. But, that is tempered by the fact that Beijing also doesn't want to see Iran fail. And also, if you have an Iran that is able to capture U.S. attention, that could relieve some of the pressure on the PRC coming from the United States. So again, it's a whole series of different interests that pull in slightly different directions.
Beijing has increasingly positioned itself as a reliable and stable partner and sort of guarantor of international order, in contrast to an increasingly erratic United States. How does it want the world to look like after the war?
So that's a pretty good question, because I think Beijing has been very effusive in terms of laying out its vision. It has its various initiatives, the Global Civilization Initiative, the Global Governance Initiative, etc. Now, that is put in contrast with an erratic, unpredictable, and sometimes violent United States. So that puts Beijing in a very good light. However, what these initiatives and also Beijing's current diplomatic push, what they actually mean, how do they transform into concrete policies that are sort of consistent across geography and across time? That's perhaps a little bit less clear. So, I guess the world is still waiting for Beijing to follow up in terms of its promises, bearing in mind that Beijing today is a little bit different from the PRC of even 10 years ago. It is perhaps a little more cash strapped because its economy is slowing down. So it has to pick and choose a lot more carefully in terms of where it wants to invest. So that means that to live up to those promises that it's made, Beijing probably needs to move a lot more strategically and a lot more carefully, especially as it thinks about where it wants to commit, and perhaps other areas where it's possible to provide some give in terms of what it's pushing for.
A delicate balancing act indeed. Well, Ja Ian Chong, thank you so much for your insights.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Moving on. What does it take to do a head count in the world's most populous nation? A national census has kicked off in India, with more than 3 million officials taking part in physical door-to-door surveys to update the country's population data last tallied in 2011. Delayed by the COVID pandemic, the project could redefine India's welfare programs and redraw its political representation across the country. Lisa Kaminov has more.
It's an ambitious project that will be carried out in multiple phases. The first phase of India's population census kicked off this week and will run until September. Over 3 million government workers are conducting door-to-door surveys to document the living conditions and demographics of the world's most populous nation.
The first phase includes the house listing. Enumerators map the area they're covering, they record the number of houses, whether there are any new buildings or buildings that no longer exist. The second phase is the actual population census. Enumerators go door to door to count the number of people living in each household.
Residents can respond to the census in person or via a new app, a digital option which will streamline the process and mark a significant shift from the massive paper records in previous years.
This time, we'll just use one single app. With this app, we can complete the entire process. It's really easy. It's very user-friendly and environmentally friendly, and data will be shared to the server immediately.
The second phase, running from this September to next April, will look at the socio-economic traits of the population like religion and caste, an ancient system of social hierarchy in India. While caste heavily dictates access to resources and education, a full count hasn't been attempted since 1931. Previous governments avoided the task to prevent triggering social tension. The data collected will be decisive for shaping welfare and public policy. It could also redraw India's political map as parliamentary and state seats are adjusted to reflect the country's population growth.
Staying in India, one of its cultural icons, Asha Bhosle, has passed away in Mumbai at the age of 92. Known as something of an ambassador for Bollywood soundtracks, Bhosle was also celebrated for mixing traditional, religious and Western melodies in her music. Olivia Salazar-Winspear has more on her illustrious career.
Bollywood's most captivating voice sings its final notes. Asha Bhosle's death at 92 years old marks the end of an era in India's musical history and an artistic loss for the nation. The iconic singer was cremated with full state honours in Mumbai, a ceremony attended by political figures, musicians, actors and sports stars, and followed by her millions of fans.
She had all the emotions for decades of her career, right from when she was 10 years till now 90. She had a variety of emotions. Any emotion you pick up, and Asha ji has a song on that.
Asha ji's music will always be alive, even 50 years from now, 100 years from now.
Born into a musical family, Bhosle's career started when she was a child in the 1940s. She worked with R.D. Burman in the 1950s and 60s on songs that spanned qawwalis, pop and Indian classical music. She became a household name and the composer became her husband. Dubbed the Queen of Playback, it was often her voice behind the Bollywood hits lip-synced by actors. The song Dum Maro Dum was a major hit in the late 60s. In later years, she collaborated with pop stars like Boy George, UK band Corner Shop paid tribute to her on the track Brimful of Asha, and she even featured on Gorilla's last album, The Mountain, released earlier this year. Bhosle celebrated her 90th birthday on stage with a concert in Dubai and was working up until the end.
I think hard work, and I always do practice for my voice. You behave with people. That must be very nice. Otherwise people say she is very proud and she's like that, is that. And I don't like proud people.
Modest words from a musician who had much to be proud of, leaving behind some 12,000 songs.
That's all for this edition of Access Asia. Thanks for watching and see you next time.